From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Hello, I'm Joe Sanders, and this is Around Foxborough. And we have three special guests today, and I want to introduce them. First, our district attorney from Norfolk County, Mr. Michael Morrissey, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here.
And we have Christy and McDougal, right? Yeah. And Christy has a friend with her. You want to introduce your friend?
Yeah, this is Bailey. This is our community resource dog, and she's housed at the Norfolk Advocates for Children right in Foxborough with us.
Great. All right. Well, I mean, so much going on in your office, I can't imagine. But our focus today, obviously, is well, certainly in Foxborough, big deal here. We have a whole committee for child sexual awareness abuse. Yeah, abuse awareness,
yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's a very active committee, and I know that you have a house right here. Can we talk a little bit? I mean, whoever would like to take off.
Sure. I can start with a little bit of the history. Former District Attorney Bill Keating, during his tenure, recognized the need for a child advocacy center. During that period of time, I think there was a growing national movement to try to bring some order to how people were dealing with young people who were victims of sexual assault, trauma, domestic violence issues. So basically through the National Children's Alliance, grew out of that an idea that, standardize the care, recognize that what is the best approach to deal with people who are often, young children especially, who are in the probably worst part of their lives, facing very difficult problems. And so we used to have an office, kind of reminds me of your control room here. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of a one-way glass, and so people could sit behind it, but you bring them into an office building, and it really it didn't have the right feel, and it just, you're trying to deal with kids who are traumatized anyway. Now you're bringing them into, it's like bringing someone into a police station.
Yeah.
And how does that work?
Not exactly open with how you feel there, right?
No, so the Foxborough State Hospital was kind of being divided up and parceled off, and the former district attorney was able to get access to a portion of the parcel, which is right behind your public safety building here in town. Mm-hmm. And he raised money and used drug forfeiture money, and he had it looks like a good sized house. Yeah. It looks a little bit, it doesn't look like an office building. It doesn't look like, I guess maybe a little bit bigger than some of the houses in the neighborhood, but it's still a warm and welcoming place. Mm-hmm. And so he spent, after probably a year and a half, they had the facility built, and it opened in April of 2010. And I remember going to the ribbon cutting when I was just getting ready to take over, and quiet, Bailey. And in November of 2010, I was really the beneficiary of having the facility built just as I took office. Mm-hmm. And so we have got our accreditation. Every 5 years we try to get accredited to make sure that we are following the guidelines, the rules, the best practices, the standards, the training, and that they check on who we're interacting with, our community partners, whether we're following those practices. And we're coming up, I think, this year in the fall. I think we're getting ready to go through another accreditation process. We've been, in my tenure, we've been through 3 of them anyway, 10, 15, 20, 3 of them. And so, we try to stay current. We do a lot of training of the staff, mm-hmm. and the staff actually does a lot of training. I'm a big believer in, so aren't they, and train the trainer. So absolutely. I know that your group here in town that's dealing with issues dealing with child abuse and domestic violence, that I'm sure they have received training or work with us one way or the other. And so the center developed, and as I said, there are some offices, conference rooms. We have, Bailey and Christy are predominantly there, but we have special victim advocates that are trained to deal with people, young people particularly. Mm-hmm. And we have mental health counselors, and we have people who have been trained to conduct interviews. It's dealing with young kids is kind of a specialized area, right. And I know you're dealing with kids now yourself. And
a few of them walked by and caused Bailey to bark.
Yeah. Well, so it's that's a big process for us. It'll take a lot of time for us, but we also do community education out of there, both in the schools and in our community partners and things like that. And generally, what it was set up to do is, let's say you had someone who made an allegation of child abuse or a sexual assault. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to have the person go through a whole series of questions. You don't want them questioned by the police, then questioned by the district attorney, questioned by DCF.
Right.
And you keep re-victimizing the victim.
Yeah.
And so the idea behind the Child Advocacy Center, and there is one in every district attorney's office in Massachusetts. We're fortunate the National Children's Alliance said there's almost 1,000 countrywide. And last year they served 382,000 children alone, and they've trained over 1.6 million people on specialized training to deal with particularly young people's problems.
Right.
So you'd come in and they would obviously with a parent and hopefully in a setting. We have playrooms for younger kids. We have toys. We have areas that we think, murals, and try to make it a warm feeling fuzzy that you're not walking into a sterile environment like an office. And I think that has worked well for us. Police departments take advantage of it. Our own state police often work on some of these cases. So we offer the opportunity to come down and have a specialized examiner come and conduct, if you had a child that you referred someone or you knew someone that'd come in, and because you want to try to get the story. You want to get it right, and you don't want to really put any more hardship or burden on those young children.
Right.
So we also have community partners that are sitting behind there's a two-way mirror, and the examiner does have an earpiece on, and so besides their own training, there are people who are behind the glass wall, per se, who also can whisper into the examiner's ear. Could you do a little bit more about...
Yeah, I think I saw that on a video that I watched about that. That is outstanding.
The center, Child Advocacy Center, would get a referral. And it could be from DCF, it could be from a police department, it could be just an ordinary citizen calling us up at the district attorney's office, and then we start the process from there. And then people may be brought into the Advocacy Center, which is a much more, it's not a sterile environment, it's kind of vibrant murals, a little more comforting and warm, and try to get young kids especially feeling comfortable to be able to tell the story. But the real trick is not to re-victimize them, so that it's kind of a one and done, the one-stop shopping for people. So we have a trained examiner who in many cases I think have received Department of Justice training and other courses to be a specialized examiner. And then we have, I know that your control room has a glass wall, and we have a two-way mirror. And behind that mirror are usually an assistant district attorney, a victim advocate, could be a police officer, someone from DCF or a community partner, maybe a mental health counselor. There's a variety of people that are behind the wall, and the trained examiner would have a microphone that we can hear, and they have an earpiece. And so as they question the child and trained to do so, to try to learn exactly what may have happened or what they saw, try to get the story, it's videotaped, and that is preserved obviously as evidence. And but people can then interject a little and say, hey, could you ask a little bit more about what happened on the night of such and such, or where you didn't ask how far away they were when they saw whatever it is. Now we've also, it's not just people who are involved with sexual assault, domestic violence, or physical trauma. We've also used it when you're dealing with young victims who may have witnessed trauma.
Okay.
And so that you have, I know we've had domestic violence where there may have been a home where they see a parent and two parents involved in a situation, and so we have used that sometimes to get the story from them if they're willing to talk to us. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, but it's still the setting that we use, and the whole idea is, in many cases, try to as quickly and swiftly as possible to bring them in to get their statement, to minimize the impact on them, and so that we get the story right from the beginning, and that's shared obviously with the defense. And sometimes not everybody who comes in there ends up being prosecuted for a crime. Sometimes it's really it leads us to a path where we want to get them services. So we have a mental health coordinator also who's sitting there as well. So while we may not do some direct counseling ourselves, we have all sorts of community partners that, depending on the type and nature of the problem, that they will find a path for you and introduce you to a provider who may get you the support and help that you need, particularly counseling.
Well, this is very educational for me, so I'm listening with
you should come down and see it
Oh, I
sometime.
will. There's no doubt about that. I have, I want to say one thing as a fairly new teacher in the school system here. I did go through the training within the last year. I was very impressed. And one of the things that hit me through the training, and maybe this will lead over to Christy, what you do, was, you really have an obligation. It's not about you feeling uncomfortable. If you see something, you need to report it, whether you have proof that it's not a matter of proof. If you see what you think is evidence of some abuse.
Chris, you'll talk. That's one of the things that we actually do. That you are now probably, because of your role as a teacher, you are considered a mandatory reporter.
Yes.
And so we do a lot of that. Christy will tell you about that.
Yeah. So Christy, welcome. I'll let you have Bailey say whatever Bailey wants, but tell us a little. Christy, by the way, is Community Outreach Director for the district. Okay.
Yeah.
So Christy, tell us a little bit about what you do and what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm the Community Outreach Director for the District Attorney's Office. However, I'm housed at the Norfolk Advocates for Children because of this little cutie right here. So we did a lot of research about the benefits of having a community resource dog, so we thought it was best that me and Bailey stay there. After the child does the forensic interview with the trained forensic interviewer, Bailey and I will go up and sit with the child afterwards, and Bailey just really mellows them out. However, your question regarding the mandated reporting and our obligations for that, my biggest role, I like to say, is providing training and education to the community members and professionals. So anyone who works with a child, anyone who volunteers to work with a child is a mandated reporter. So teachers, camp counselors, firefighters, police officers, clergy, anyone who works with a child, anyone who volunteers to work with a child is a mandated reporter, and they have that obligation to make a mandated report when they suspect a child is being harmed, neglected, physically abused, sexually abused, or commercially sexually exploited. So it's my biggest role to help people understand, recognize, and how to respond to that. So what is a mandated report? How do you make a mandated report? And what happens after that mandated report is made? Because oftentimes people feel so conflicted. They're like, but I know this family, that can never happen. But it's really not your job to determine that, because we have the Norfolk Advocates for Children. We follow that CAC, the Child Alliance model, and we take that multidisciplinary team approach. So that's my role, is to help people understand why we have that multidisciplinary team approach in place. Hey, come over here. So what that multidisciplinary team approach is to gather everyone who participates in that forensic interview, who sits on the other side of the glass: the police, the assistant district attorneys, the mental health coordinators, the victim witness advocates, the pediatric SANE nurse, and I feel like I'm missing
Now, pediatric SANE nurses would be trained in child trauma and the specialized training, and they're also involved in it. And DCFs is usually there.
Yes, DCF.
Sometimes we get referrals from the Department of Children and Families, that we have to follow up on, and sometimes we're referring to them too. I mean, it's a two-way street, and the idea that that we do a lot of make sure that people understand their role as being a mandatory reporter, so that they know there's no I guess it's better to be safe than sorry to report something when you see something and you have a concern. But as I said to you, not everything, just because you get and end up at the advocacy center, doesn't mean that a crime has been committed.
Right.
It could be a child really in need of services of some kind, and that has suffered or seen some trauma. So there's a whole bunch of different roles. I mean, we do hundreds of exams a year. I mean, I forget the last number, but I would be surprised that we're over 400 exams.
Well, like I said, the training that it was 3 to 4 hours, I can't remember, and the part that stuck with me, because I was one coming into that training thinking, I'd be hesitant to report anything. I was coming in. That's
now
the way
you have to.
Now I have to, but any reticence to to not report it. When you look at, they had some stories in the training about people where things weren't reported and what happened.
Yeah.
Not to the person that didn't report, but to the person that nobody told anybody about, and the terrible stories. And
Well, it's equally as bad for someone who should know better and should be a mandatory, reporter.
yes,
I mean, we don't hold anybody, in the sense that we encourage you. We're trying to make you comfortable to make that report, and that you have a lot of resources, I'm sure, within the school system to help you out.
absolutely.
And you figure that if you make a report, I'm sure they're going to look at it as well and help provide guidance to where they think it should be, referred to next.
Christy, you touched on something in the first statement there about oh, I know the family, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
How wrong are we when we make these assumptions?
Yeah, so I like to encourage all my mandated reporters, whoever attends my training. I understand that you have these connections with these families, but it's not your job to determine whether harm's being happened, if harm or anything's happening at home. Leave it to the professionals who are investigating that. I like to say I like to go to bed at night knowing I did what I was supposed to. So when anything ever came up, so I used to be an advocate when I first started at the DA's office. So whenever something came up to me, I wanted to leave the office knowing that I did my role, I made the mandated report, and I was able to go home knowing that I did what I was supposed to.
Right.
It's not up to anyone to decide whether abuse is happening at someone's home or not, because they're not there. They're not living in that child's home with them. And it's really not their job. So leave it to the people who are part of that multidisciplinary team, who are trauma-informed, who follow this approach together. We host the MDT orientation to make sure that we work together collaboratively as a team and do what's best for the children.
Yeah, and I think that the more that the education of this whole topic, the more people will understand that, okay, they weren't really after me, they were trying to take care of my child.
Exactly.
And that's I guess, the turning point when we know we've got it.
Well, there are clearly some people who aren't going to be happy about it. I can assure you of that. But but as you said, the whole thing is guided is the best interest of the child.
Yes.
And that's the the basic rule that we follow. That I know in the fall we do a slew of trainings in the schools.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of new teachers, a lot of people, so we try to get the word out. And some people don't even realize their role as a mandatory reporter, and that's equally important for us to get out. And
well, I can tell you in Foxborough, we're on top of it. I mean, in the schools, I mean, I'm new this year to the school, and I had to go through it, and there was no doubt that we needed, I needed to get this done early.
Yeah, I mean, we receive so many referrals from DCF. We do about 80 forensic
So, and we also do mental health referrals, I said to you. We have a number of agencies throughout the county, because it's a big county, that we work with, hospitals as well. So we have over 50 groups that we are, one way or another, touch our community partners.
Yeah.
And every single police department obviously participates at one way or another.
Yeah.
So,
I think myself as a mandatory reporter, or even as an adult who's concerned about, they see something, well, what do I do? They need to know that we've got this multidisciplinary group that really does the work. You make the call, and they do all the work investigating.
And even if you're wrong, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if you happen to be right, then we'll try to find the right path forward for that child.
And that's I think the most important. I think for people that are wondering, should I call or not? No, you should. You really should. We've only got about 2 or 3 more minutes, so I want to turn it
one
over.
last thing that Christy talked about is that we have commercial exploitation of children, which is CSAC, a special committee, and one quick word on that, because that happens a lot, and that's something that she's intimately involved in.
Yeah, so the commercial sexual exploitation of children is something that happens all throughout America. A lot of times people think it's just like the movie Taken. Kids are abducted from their homes, and that's not it. Commercial sexual exploitation is an act of sex with a fee. So that could be food, shelter, water, tattoos, eyelashes, new clothing. So just really spreading the education on what it actually is. We host a task force meeting for that, so we could educate community members, we could educate professionals working
police officers,
working with those kids on what that is. So we host task force meetings regarding commercial sexual exploitation of children, recognizing and responding to child abuse, and then we also host I conduct a training for internet safety from middle school up to high school and community members.
Safe dating and other issues that young people train in. And finally, we'll leave you with, it's partially funded through state funds and the district attorney's office, private funds, and we do have a road race every year that I don't have the date, but it's usually in the spring. We run a road race right here in the spring, and that helps raise money for us as well. So we're active in the community, and I want people to know that it's a good place, it's a safe place for anybody who's really, finds themselves in that kind of situation. But we appreciate the opportunity to tell people a little bit about what happens.
Well, I don't think there's anything more important than the safety of our children. I mean, When I worked at a university, I was on what they call the Title IX committee.
Sure.
And I was on the appeals committee for assault in the dorms.
Sure.
And
Doesn't sound like a good
it's
place
serious.
to be.
No, but the training was outstanding.
Awesome, yeah.
It's kind of double-edged. You go, oh my gosh, all this, but it's
Yeah, but you got to be ready for it.
Yes, you got to be ready. You can't bury your head in the
Stuff
sand.
happens, and that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we really like to provide, be a resource. Like, this is who we are, this is what we do. If you ever have a doubt, if you ever have a question, we'd rather you call us, ask your questions,
Sure.
than make any guesses or assumptions,
Sure.
and then feel uneasy about your decision.
Absolutely. Well, I think you hit it on the head when you said, well, you got to go, when you go home or you go to bed at night, you got to feel like you did the best you can.
Yes.
And this is part of it. Well, Michael Morrissey, District Attorney, thank you very much. Kristen
Thanks for the
McDougal,
invitation.
thank you.
Of
And
course.
Bailey, thank
Yeah.
you. You were a good dog. I don't care what she says.
Yeah, a couple bucks.
Well, that's it for this time, folks. This is Joe Sanders, your host at Around Foxborough. See you next time.